Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm just going to give it a few more seconds as everyone is joining the webinar, and then I will get started. Okay, well, I will go ahead and get started. It's so great to see so many people that have joined us today. Welcome. My name is Angel Hines, and I'm the Public Policy Manager here at the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us today for this important webinar on accessible air travel and understanding your rights as a traveler with a disability. Today's session is designed to give you knowledge, tools, and confidence to navigate air travel more safely, more smoothly, and with the dignity that you deserve. We will walk through federal protections under the Air Carrier Access Act, give an update on the wheelchair user rule, and provide some practical steps for preparing for air travel and what to do if your rights are violated or your mobility device is damaged. Um, Start us off, I'm going to turn it over to Danica Gonzalez. She is the Senior Advocacy Attorney at Paralyzed Veterans of America. She also serves as a co-chair for the CCD Transportation Task Force. Danica graduated from the GW University of Law School, where she advocated for people and students with disabilities. After law school, she was awarded an Equal Justice Works Fellowship and built a nationwide program to fight for justice for veterans with mental health conditions. At Paralyzed Veterans for America, she now focuses on accessibility for mobility device users. Danica continues to diligently advocate for the rights of people with disabilities for safe and accessible air travel, transportation, hotels, healthcare, recreation, and everyday life. Danica will provide us with a regulatory update and walk us through the rights and protections available to travelers with disabilities. After Danica's update, then I'll introduce our next speakers, Alan and TJ, who will guide us through the planning and preparation and day of travel best practices. So I will turn it over to Danica now to get us started.
Hi, everyone. My name is Danica Gonzalez. I'm the Senior Advocacy Attorney at Paralyzed Veterans of America. If we can have the next slide. First, I want to start with the overall law that applies to air travel. Many people know the Americans with Disabilities Act, which prohibits discrimination in everyday life, but this actually doesn't apply to air travel. Instead, there's a law called the Air Carrier Access Act that prohibits discrimination on basis of disability in air travel. This is also known as the ACAA. It was actually passed before the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1996 and 1986, and since then, air travel passengers with disabilities have rights during air travel. Under the ACAA, passengers have rights such as the right to travel because an airline cannot deny a person with a disability the right to travel by air. Examples of discrimination would be the denial of air transportation. They can also not require a passenger with a disability to provide advance notice that they will be traveling. However, if you do need certain accommodations, such as aisle chair assistance and boarding and deplaning, it is always good to notify the airline in advance. Airlines also cannot limit the number of people with disabilities on a certain flight. In addition, large commercial aircrafts must have certain accessibility features, such as movable armrests. Under the original law, airlines were required to provide certain accommodations for passengers with disabilities. For example, airlines must provide prompt assistance in boarding and deplaning. This can be aisle chair assistance or push wheelchair assistance. Airlines must also offer pre-boarding to those who need additional time to board. In addition, airlines must train those who deal with the traveling public in the requirements of the Air Carrier Access Act. Notably, airline contractors, such as those who provide aisle chair assistance, must also follow these laws. However, the original law failed to define a lot of these requirements, such as what does prompt assistance mean? Last year, the Department of Transportation, also known as the DOT, issued a rule in December 2024 that gave the specifics on these requirements. To explain the difference between a rule and a rule is passed by a government agency whereas a law is passed by Congress, but this rule is still binding on the entities that are covered. This new rule was a major win for disability rights advocates and passengers who use wheelchairs and scooters. Next slide, please. The rule was called the Ensuring Safe Accommodations for Air Travelers with Disabilities Using Wheelchairs, and the rule applied to airline passengers who use wheelchairs or scooters while flying. The rule took the requirements of the Air Carrier Access Act and further explained them. For example, the ACAA required airlines to provide safe and dignified assistance in boarding and deplaning, but did not define these terms. Now, these new rules defined what this meant. For example, safe means assistance provided to individuals with disabilities that does not put them at a heightened risk of bodily injury, which may include loss or damage to wheelchairs and other assistive devices that result in bodily injury. Dignified means assistance provided in a manner that respects a passenger's independence, autonomy, and privacy. It was important that the law's requirements be explicitly defined so that passengers could fully understand their rights. These rules also had multiple notification requirements. For example, initially requires the airlines to notify passengers before their flight of their rights, notify the passenger when their mobility device had been loaded and offloaded, and immediately notify the passenger when their wheelchair has been damaged. Before the rules, passengers were forced to use the airline contractors to repair any damage to their wheelchair. And this could lead to lengthy delays waiting for responses from these contractors, or if their chair required specialized parts. Under the new requirements, airlines must allow the passenger to choose whether to use their contractor or a contractor of their choice to repair the wheelchair. In addition, DOT clarified that airlines must provide loaner wheelchairs with the functional and safety related customizations to the maximum extent possible. Since some planes cannot transport all sizes of wheelchairs due to the dimensions in their cargo hold, DOT required airlines to publish the dimensions of their cargo hold, and a lot of the airlines publish these online. In addition, airlines were initially supposed to pay the difference if a passenger cannot use their preferred flight because of the dimensions of their chair and were forced to take a more expensive flight. And we'll talk about that in just 1 second. A major win for the disability community and those who use wheelchairs and scooters were the enhanced training requirements for personnel who deal with the traveling public, who physically assist passengers, such as performing the aisle chair transfers, and personnel who load and offload wheelchairs and scooters out of the cargo hold. This also initially included more frequent refresher trainings. Many of these requirements were supposed to go into effect in January of 2025, but due to enforcement delays, were now effective August 1st of 2025. But there are still some requirements that are not yet into effect, like those pertaining to onboard wheelchairs. However, there have been some changes to this. Next slide, please. On September 29th, the DOT announced they were not going to enforce certain provisions of that rule. And this included four aspects of the rule itself. First was the airline's liability. This means that if the passenger's device is not returned in the same condition in which it was surrendered, they are not going to assume automatically that the airline is at fault. There are certain specific situations where they would still require the airline to repair the wheelchair, and we'll talk about that in 1 minute. But there are also some situations they would deem it not automatically the airline's fault. Second was the frequency of refresher training, and that is to determine how often the personnel have to be retrained on their assistance provided to the passengers or those who load or offload the wheelchairs in the cargo bin. Third, they are going to look at, again, the passenger notifications about their wheelchairs and scooters prior to boarding. And fourth, the reimbursement of fare differences in the different flights that can accommodate the passenger's mobility device. What this means is that these four aspects are going to be put on hold during this time. And this enforcement delay indicated they would be on hold until December 31st, 2026. The reason why these four provisions are put on hold is because there is going to be new rulemaking expected in August 2026 called the Wheelchair User Rule 2, just like the one that passed last year. But importantly, and super, super important to remember, can we go to the next slide, please? The DOT will still continue to enforce the airline's requirements to pay for damaged wheelchairs and scooters and provide the loaner wheelchairs if the passenger's wheelchair or scooter was damaged or destroyed. So, this is important to remember that you do still have the right, despite the enforcement delay, to have your wheelchair or scooter repaired or replaced. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danica. That was a lot of information. That's really valuable, and definitely I feel like the community needed some clarification on all of the changes and updates, and may just have not even been aware of the rule at all. So we appreciate that. Real quick, there was just one question in the Q&A that said, "Are the laws different for kids with disabilities?" And I was going to respond, there is no distinguish, but I just wanted you to also just share that with you. I can't think of anywhere in the ACAA or in the rule where they talk about underage people, people with disabilities. Correct?
That is correct. There is no different for the rights of children with disabilities versus the rights of adults with disabilities.
All right. Thank you. So we're going to have time for questions at the end. So please, if anyone had questions on those updates to the regulations, feel free to put them in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end of the panel discussion that we're going to lead into now. So thanks again, Danica. And now we will hear from two of my colleagues here at the Reeve Foundation, Alan Brown and TJ Griffin. Alan is the Director of New Partner Engagement, and TJ is one of my favorite peer and family mentor coordinators here with the Reeve Foundation. So they are going to give us some real talk on air travel through the holiday season. If you can go to the next slide, and we will kick off with Alan providing some things to remember when planning and preparing before flying.
All right. Thank you, Angel. Um, so first of all, thank you all for being here. And it's really important that we are all joining as a community to share our experiences and educate others, but we should all communicate to let everybody know what air travel issues they have, good or bad. So I am a 59-year-old quadriplegic for 38 years. I'm wearing a blue and white striped shirt and blue glasses. Um, so when I travel often. I use a power wheelchair. I use a iBot wheelchair for those who knows what that is. And I will go online and I'll book my ticket. And then immediately when I get my confirmation, I call customer service and I let them know that I will be traveling with a power device. And once I get them on the phone and let them know what kind of, I need an aisle chair and I'm traveling with a caregiver and I'm going to be a full lift assist. And I make sure that all goes into the computer. I also want to make sure that I get the seat as close as I can to the front of the plane so I'm not being pulled too far back. And that's kind of what I do just in the very beginning. TJ, maybe you want to kind of jump in. Do you have some other
Yeah,
stuff on your beginning flight stuff just to
yeah. Thank you, Alan. I do the similar things. I always call, usually most airlines have a disability office. So I always kind of actually book my ticket with them. I don't really try to book it online because I want to make sure that they um, sometimes they can get you up to bulkhead or a bigger, somewhere where more foot room. Because I'm a C5, C6 quadriplegic myself. I'm 53 years old, been injured for 35 years. I'm wearing a blue shirt with glasses. And I have been flying pretty much since day one of my injury when I was hurt when I was 18. Things have gotten a little better and some, over the years, but I always call the disability office now and I let them know that I use a power wheelchair, a Permobil. I let them know that my batteries, it's very important to let them know what kind of batteries you are, like my gel cell, so you don't have to disengage them or disconnect them. They worry about that. So if you tell them that, that makes a big difference. And I even write directions on how to use my chair. So when I do have to get down to the chair and get to the aisle chair, what they'll do. But the most important thing is booking in advance. It will make your life a little easier. You can do it the day of, or but I wouldn't advise it. I think sometimes the more prepared you are, and the more you do in advance, the easier you find it to travel. I know we're going to go through more. I'm going to let Alan, but I wanted to get to that beginning is talking with the disability office really makes a difference. Even getting your ticket through them, I trust talking to the person, making sure the ticket was done instead of just doing it online.
Yes, and also you'll start to know on some of the air carriers when you're going to book, they will ask you for the dimensions. If you have a mileage account with them, your profile will now let you know your wheelchair, some of them up to 4 devices. So depending on which air carrier you're using, there are things online in your profile that should carry over as you're traveling. So they are looking to make our lives a little bit easier. And I keep always say this to everybody, be proactive, communicate. It's the best thing to do going forward. So, I also make sure that I have all the proper paperwork for my chair before I go to the airport to make sure that I know that I could put it on my chair and they know how to move my chair when I am not using it. So there's a lot of stuff that we have to do with regards to booking in advance, but then before we even leave to the airport, I have to start preparing a bag that I'm going to have to do to make sure that my chair is packed the way that I need to be packed. So hopefully I get it back in one piece. So TJ, you want to maybe jump in there?
Yeah, I was talking about for me. I tape the directions on the joystick of my chair, and um, when I get to the airport, I have my ticket and I go through security. I also, most importantly, when I check my baggage, I make sure to tell them the bag that I have my medical equipment in. I let them know this is medical equipment in this bag because they won't charge you for that bag with that one with the medical equipment. It's very important you remind them that there's medical equipment in that bag so you don't get charged for that because we do need like certain chargers or, depending on your level of injury or your type of disability, we all have different types of medical needs. But when you have medical needs in that bag, you want to make that apparent to the ticket agent when you're checking your bags in. When I go through security, just be prepared if you haven't gone through that. I have to go and they have to pat me down, and they'll ask you how much you can lean forward and what you can lean and do, and then they're gonna run their hands through you with gloves, and then they put the gloves into the little testing machine, and it takes sometimes it takes 7 to 8 minutes. Sometimes I've been up to 15 minutes. I hate to say it's just kind of it depends on where you go and who you're dealing with, but it's not terribly intrusive. It's just sometimes when it's busy, it can take a little while. So you want to take that into effect when you're lining yourself up to go there.
Definitely.
Uh,
So,
yeah, I
TJ,
was gonna say,
definitely use TSA Cares. I just started using it. You can call ahead, especially if you're traveling with a caregiver. Let them know, and they will actually call you in advance. And they also have an app which has become pretty good to start getting through the airport a little bit easier from that standpoint.
yeah,
So take advantage
and
of
the
it.
And the other thing that's really important is making sure you explain certain things if you're when they're doing the pat down. Like I always tell them, like, okay, I have a leg bag that's on the inside of my leg. So when you feel that, please don't think it's some me smuggling something in. And I let them know what the leg bag is for my drainage, my urine, and so they know that it's like kind of what Alan just recently said. Open competition communication is going to be a huge part. The more you can tell them about what you can and can't do, whether you can lean forward, whether you can lean to your side, whatever it might be, or if you have certain medical, products inside. Like I have a baclofen pump. It's kind of metal. It's inside my stomach, but it's inside, but it's kind of hard. So when they're feeling it, I explain to them what that is. So I advise you to try not to be too shy. It's actually be open and honest. They'll really appreciate that, and usually they're like, "Oh, okay, great, that's good," and then they move on.
Yeah, have a sense of humor when you go through sometimes. It makes it a little bit easier.
It does. I will say when I complain, if you complain a lot, they're going to take longer. So if you understand it's their job, they're doing the best they can, and they're probably also some of them might not be familiar with whatever your situation might be or might be new. So you always kind of give them a break of they're learning as well.
And then once, obviously you get through that, then you have to get to the airport, get over your gate. I always get there a little bit early. I obviously let them know that I'm going to be a carry-on, make sure that they have an aisle chair, and I ask for two strong individuals. Um, you know, that is the main thing, and you want to board first, and then have them start, whoever's traveling with you, maybe take your chair apart, take the footrests with you, the controller for your chair, anything you could take off your chair that you could put in the overhead bin, cushions, things along those lines. Take that with you. When boarding the plane, they're going to send two people over, and sometimes three. I like two. And you need to be very straightforward with how you like to be handled. They think they know what they're doing, but each of us like to be handled a little bit differently. So you need to make sure of that. Also, before I even get on the airplane, I do request that the individual from underneath the plane that's working, that will be handling my chair. My chair weighs 288 pounds, rolls like a baby carriage once it's in neutral. But I want to talk to that person underneath and let them know. I videotape my chair before I get on the plane, and I always tell the gate agent, hopefully I will delete it on the other side with no broken problems. And I show the chair in all modes. Another thing I started doing recently is I ask for the pilot, and I tell the pilot, could you please make sure when we land to let the individual on the ground know there's a power chair coming off. This is where they need to switch on the chair to use it. I have a printed out sheet of paper, and he can show it to them. And that's kind of what I do getting on the plane and going from there. TJ, anything on
Yeah,
your?
I'm very similar. I try to get to the ticket agent first. Usually I'm there before the ticket agent is even there, and when they get there, I kind of want to be there. One of the first ones saying, "Listen, I need pre-board, and then I will need two people on an aisle chair, but I need two big guys, and or women. I'm not saying either one, but I just need two big, strong people that can lift me. And if for some reason they don't have that, can we get a third? And I tell them how I want it. I have a little bit, I have good shoulders, so I can kind of at least hold my arms up against me, so that kind of helps. But some people might not have the best shoulders, so you want to do what's best for you. I do take off my headrest. I take off my cushion. I make sure that all my wallet and everything's out of my bags that are attached to my chair. But um, unfortunately, my cushion is too wide to sit on the actual airplane chair, so I put it up in the upper head bin, and I have a little small rubber cushion that I bought through Amazon or one of the local, and just put it down there because those those hospital seats are not the most comfortable. The one thing I will say is be prepared on the aisle chair when they're moving you and they put you on the aisle chair. Even though it might take a little longer, make sure they strap you in completely so you don't risk falling out or sliding over to your side. They're gonna strap you up, and I hate to say it, it does kind of look almost like Hannibal Lecter at one point, but they're just doing it for your safety to get you completely locked in. And I usually have them, when they move me, make sure that I also have somebody there with the legs, and they strap those legs in so they're not falling off and you don't hurt your ankle or anything like that. But more importantly, what I do is once I'm in the aisle chair, if there's somebody with me, I can have them help show me. But if they're not, I'm flying by myself, I will show them and explain to them how to lean my chair back. I have a different chair than Alan. I use a Permobil. So my chair, yeah, I don't know if everyone will have the same capability, but my chair can actually, the back of it can lay somewhat flat. So I usually have it do that, and then I put it out of gear, and they push it up to the elevator, lower it down, take it to the airplane. The reason why I try to lower the back all the way is I would like them to not turn the power wheelchair on its side. That's usually where we get in trouble sometimes. Of things have happened in the past, and when they turn on its side, so I lowered the back of the chair to keep it as flat as possible to give us as much headroom so it can be put in without being put on its side. Once I get to the actual chair, I make sure they put me in, but don't be afraid if you feel like you're not all the way back, because sometimes, several times, I've been in there where I'm not all the way back and I'm like, I need to get back, because you don't want to have a chance of sliding out or being uncomfortable or putting more pressure on a certain, part of your body. So I always make sure they pull me back, even if that means I ask them to lean me forward and pull me back a little bit by my pants. But I want to make sure I'm completely comfortable, especially if I know it's going to be a long 2.5, 3 hour flight. I want to make sure I'm as comfortable as possible.
All right. There we
Great.
go. And
Thank
I
you.
forgot. Okay.
Thank you both on that. I'm just gonna interrupt. We have a lot of questions coming in, which
Okay.
we will address the bulk of them towards the end. But there was a question I'm scrolling through about the closet, where a manual chairs can be put in, and should they request that in advance? TJ, do you have experience with that?
It depends on the type of manual chair you have. If you have a manual chair that folds up and it's gonna be able to fit, make sure they should give you the dimensions when you call ahead about what that closet will be. But a lot of people, their manual chair is a rigid chair, so it folds back down. If that's the case, they're gonna have to take it and put it down. I'll be honest, most of the cases now they're usually bringing even the manual chairs, they're bringing them down and putting them on the bottom. If you mandate it, you want it in there, you got to make sure that when it's folded up that it can fit. That might mean you have to take the tires off or the wheels off. So you're going to want to check that and what the dimensions are on the plane you're flying, and if your chair will fit. That means I would fold it up beforehand and measure it and see it and let them know beforehand if they're going to be able to let you.
Yeah. Okay, we can go ahead and start talking about go over the next slide as I
Okay.
go through
I'll
this.
let Ellen go.
I'll jump in here. So after this lovely smooth flight, we land and we have to figure out how we're getting off the plane. So obviously we have, as I said, I'm in a power chair, and once we land, actually before we land, I do remind the stewardess again, and obviously the pilot has been notified before we took off. We are the last one off the plane. I know TJ and I did not mention this on the front end. We are also the first ones on the plane. And we should ask for that so we can be put on the plane with dignity. And they take us off last. By the time we get off, they're just getting the luggage there anyway, so it's really not that big of a deal. Um, I wait for my chair to come up, and sometimes they're going to try to push you get off the plane. I will not get off of the plane until I know that my power chair is right at the door of the plane, and then the person that I'm traveling with will go put my footrests on, put the power on, and make sure the chair is working before I get in it. Once I do get into the chair, I check everything. I check all modes of my chair to make sure that everything is working. Because if there is a problem when you get off the plane and there's damage, which my last flight, they ripped one of my casters off my chair. Um, you immediately have to report that, and you should submit a claim to the DOT and let them understand what's going on so they have a constant record of what's happening. Um, One thing that's really important also, and when you're getting off the plane or you're getting on the plane, and the individuals that are helping you get on and off the plane are not listening to you, or they have moved you the wrong way or anything along those lines, you need to report that immediately. They are not directly employees of the airlines most of the time. They're a contractor. And sometimes, it's not the easiest to get the right people to get you off. But if you do have an issue, say something immediately, because once you leave that gate, the turnover happens and you really kind of lose your chance. Uh, TJ, you want to kind of jump in?
Yeah, I want to agree with that. I also want to say one thing. When you are pre-boarding before your flight, I forgot to say that when I'm about to go down and get on the aisle chair and get onto the airplane, I always ask the ticket agent if they can go ahead and put a note or radio ahead, make a call ahead to where I'm going to be flying to let them know that I'm going to need two guys or two people, strong people, if not three, to lift me out of the plane chair into the aisle chair and into my chair. So sometimes they'll have them ready, but I do the same thing as Alan. I make sure that my chair is there before they decide they're going to get me off the chair. Unfortunately, once I made that mistake and I didn't, and I had to wait in the aisle chair for almost an hour, and that's not good for my skin. So I was very worried. So I've learned that to wait and be respectful, but also forceful. The reason why I need to do it is for my skin, and I need to get the chair, and also you want to make sure that your chair is there before they leave. um, the one thing I will say about as similar to Alan is if you do have an issue, unfortunately, where you're dropped or they hurt your shoulder or they do something, report it and report it not just to the airline or the the ticket you report to the Department of Transportation of who the DOT, and make sure that you make a formal complaint, write it out and do it, because that's how things get put into record and they can actually report it. And the reportings are very important for us. The other thing is I check my chair thoroughly. And when I say I check my chair, I raise the elevator up, I do the tilt and recline. I have someone look behind, make sure there's nothing cracked, because that has happened. And I try to do as a thorough inspection as possible, because you you can get away with saying, even if you leave the next, you leave and you come back, oh, I messed up, but it's harder if so much better to report that immediately. If there is something that happens and you feel like, your chair is broke, like when Alan's caster was broke, usually I ask everyone, where do I go? How do I report this? And they usually steer me to somewhere near the baggage claim area, and they have an actual process of doing it. They will take all your information. They'll have you write out everything about it. You can even send pictures. I always send pictures just to make sure. And usually it's global services or the people they contract out that's in charge of making sure that you get either a loaner chair or get this fixed while you're getting, service. They call you usually within an hour, hour and a half. Am I right, Alan? Usually mine's been about within 2 hours. So that's always good. But make sure you have that number of who's going to be calling you so you recognize it. And if you don't hear something within a couple hours, you can call them as well.
Yeah, I mean, once you file a claim, the global repair group is calling you pretty quickly to find out what you need, and to try to get the solution. I know TJ and I discussed this earlier, prepping for this call, but remember to be resourceful. Know where you're traveling. You know what kind of chair you have. Make sure you have, like a backup tire if you need it or things along those lines. But on the other side, know your manufacturer, know their sales rep people out there. Like, God forbid you need something. You know, they're going to try to get you a device as quickly as you can, but you should also kind of be a little bit resourceful from that standpoint of being proactive. Another thing also is uh, just get, I just lost my thought. I'm sorry, TJ,
Yeah.
jump.
Oh, I could. One thing I was going to say is sometimes we have connecting flights, and sometimes the airline will say it's easier for us to not have to bring you up into get your power chair. They'd like to bring it. They can bring you in the aisle chair, or they can bring you more of a transportation regular wheelchair over to to the other gate where you're going to have the connecting flight. I have done that, but what I did ask them to do was show me a picture of my power chair on the plane that I was on. So I knew that at the time when I was actually going to Hawaii, I was like, the last thing I wanted was to be in Hawaii and not have my power chair there. So it really gave me a peace of mind saying, could you take a picture? And they did. They sent it up. They brought it to me, showed it to me while we were on the plane. So I knew that it was there. But also I made sure to, with the disability office, to stress the importance of giving me enough time in between and letting the airline know, the other, the pilot know of the second plate I was going to be on that I was connecting to, that I am in a wheelchair. So if there was a delay, they knew why.
That's great.
Again, it
TJ,
comes down to communication.
and sorry to interrupt you there, TJ, but
No,
I'm glad that you brought up um, changing planes because we've had a couple questions. If you guys wouldn't mind just sharing your experiences with handling layovers or changing planes and any issues that come up and how you deal with that. And after that, we've had a couple questions on international flights. So I know you said you went to Hawaii, that's not international, but preparing for a longer travel. And also, if you had any international flights, if you can talk a little bit about that as well.
yeah, I did the long flight. It was a 7 hour flight to Hawaii, which I haven't done international yet. I am looking to do it, but 7 hours is similar to maybe going to England or certain things. But the one thing I had to do was, I made sure to have a urinal to drain my leg bag into because I knew there was no way and I'm able to drain into a bag. Some people have to cath, and I know that some people know that it's too hard to get in and out of the bathroom and transfer. So what they've done is they have a bigger blanket and privacy blanket, put it completely over them, and they've used that as a catheter situation. I always, even though you can't do tilt and recline like in a power wheelchair, for my pressure relief for my skin. When I first got hurt 35 years ago, there really wasn't tilt and recline. So I had to learn the old way, which is you lean forward as much as possible to raise a little bit of your butt up a little bit, so you're off your ischium. So what I try to do is lean as far forward as I possibly can. Most of the time my head is all the way up against the chair in front of me, but at least I'm doing that to get some of the relief off my bottom. If I can't do that, I'll have my whoever's with me flying, because if I'm flying that long, I'm usually flying with someone. I'll have them lean me to my left, lean me to my right to make sure I'm getting pressure reliefs off of my skin. Those are the most important things you're going to do. The other thing is, if for some reason you're flying by yourself, which I have had to do, and there was a delay and I was stuck on the tarmac, I did have to explain to the flight attendant. In my little carry-on bag, I had a little urinal, and she was very discreet. She was very understanding, and I showed her exactly how to drain my bag because I was stuck on the plane on the tarmac for 3.5 hours, and it was only supposed to be an hour and a half flight. So it's be prepared is what I say. Always bring it on your carry-on bag. Make sure you have an extra medical equipment in case something happened and your luggage with your medical equipment was gone. You could at least last a day, 2 days or something, and have a urinal. Have those things because it's better to over prepare than to under prepare. Alan?
Definitely. And bring your medicine with you.
Yes.
Make sure you have with you. With regards to Angel asked about changing flights. Obviously, I try not to do that. Sometimes you have no choice. So what I will do is, depending on the flight, sometimes it is easier to just have your device go through to the second plane for everybody. And I am pretty verbal about, if I am going to do this, please have a wheelchair for me and get me over to the other plane as quickly as possible. Because sometimes you have a short stay. If I do have a longer stay, I'll ask for my chair back, and then I will hopefully catch my flight on time. With regard to international travel, I have done long flights over to Israel. So what I have done, I've no direct flight, so I've had to stop every time. And trying to deal with some of these international airlines are not easy. I had a great airline that I was on going through Turkey, but in the airport, they really did not, they were not great with me. I never actually got my chair back, and I did have a 4 hour layover, and they kept me basically in an aisle chair for the whole time. Also, traveling internationally, if you're using a power chair, make sure that you have whatever your charger is and that you bring the plug to make sure you have what you need in the other country. Um, I was literally just on a call earlier today with regards to one of the airlines that I work with regards to disability travel, and they are talking about international travel and try making it more cohesive because it's very difficult dealing with all the different countries, but they are trying to come up with some kind of solution for the international travel and the different languages and barriers in the different countries.
And even if you're international or domestic, you want to make sure that wherever you're flying, you do a little research to see it, like from a transportation standpoint from the airport. Don't just assume that there's always a wheelchair taxi available, a wheelchair accessible taxi. Some places might take a long time. Some places might. You might have to line that up. So I would definitely try to line that up beforehand.
100%. All right, TJ,
Sorry about that.
you there? All right, so remember your rights. DJ, you want to jump in here or Amy?
And no, I just wanted to bring this up
Okay.
to just reinforce everything that you are saying, but to remind everyone that the Department of Transportation does have an Air Passengers with Disabilities Bill of Rights. So you all have the right to be treated with dignity and respect, receive information in accessible format, assistance at airports. All of these here, I'm not going to receive them all, but just wanted to remind everyone here of that and reinforce what you both said about um, filing complaints. And I want to remind you to file not just with the airline you're traveling, but grievances can also be filed with the Department of Transportation. We always like to stress that because this data is very important. And for enforcement. So there's a link here, and we're gonna, when we do the follow-up after the webinar, we will include this link and the phone number. Um, so I'm going to now go back because there's quite a few questions that we have. I'm going to try and get through as many as we can. And if we're not able to, we will either follow up with you individually afterwards. And there may have been some that I haven't, that I have marked dismissed in here because they're more comments. So we're going to try and just stick to the questions right now. There was a question. I'm going to ask Danica to just come back up on screen because there was a question early on um, about why did the Department of Transportation announce they would not enforce certain provisions of the rule? So I don't, if you wouldn't mind chatting about that.
Absolutely. This is Danica. The delay in enforcement was due heavily to a lawsuit that was filed earlier this year by the airlines. They are challenging some of the provisions in the wheelchair rule, and that is why it's not the entire rule that is being delayed, just certain provisions. And I wanted to clarify one aspect because I did see it come up in the Q&A regarding the airline liability for if they damage your wheelchair. So, what the airlines were specifically talking about with in regards to liability were things such as acts of God or things that resulted in damage that were completely outside the airline's control. So you don't have to prove that the airline damaged your wheelchair. They're looking at very specific instances where the airline could not do anything in order to not have the wheelchair damage. So if they do damage your wheelchair, you don't have to prove it was them. You don't need to submit any type of documentation. They still should be repairing your wheelchair.
Thank you so much. Also, Danica, can you talk a little bit? There's a question about flying internationally, and does this apply when you travel abroad?
So the rules apply to any flight that essentially touches the US. So you're leaving from the US or you're flying into the US. That's when the Air Carrier Access Act and all the regulations would apply. If the flight is completely international, you're going from an international country to another international country, these laws and rules do not apply in that instance.
The next question, there's a question about loaner chairs. So, TJ and Alan, and even Danica, if you want to touch on the changes or if there's any requirements that have changed or on your experience with loaner chairs. And the exact question is, if your chair is electric, will they loan you a comparable chair? What is your experience on that?
Um, I've had once where I've had my chair completely broken, and I ended up borrowing a chair from a friend because they were not able to get me something. They think that a scooter is something that is just very easy for somebody like TJ and I to use, which is usually their solution. That's kind of why I said earlier in the conversation is kind of be proactive, knowing where you're going, knowing what your manufacturer is. They usually do have chairs around, and you never know. But they're supposed to get you what you as close to what your accommodations are. It's never going to be perfect, but they do make an effort. And I know last time when this thing happened in Philadelphia a couple of weeks ago, I mean, they were doing whatever they can to get me a power chair. It would have taken a, about a half a day. That's kind of what I noticed to kind of get me a device that I needed.
I real quick piggyback on what Alan said. I had it happen once. Luckily, I was in a bigger city where the chair company I use, I live in Dallas Fort Worth, and the chair company I use is one of more nationwide. And there was one of those chair companies was there, so they were able to bring me to the hotel a loaner chair very similar to the power chair that I use. So I got lucky, but I've also been in a situation where I had to be stuck in a manual chair for a day, and that was not great because I could not push myself because I don't have, just don't have I'm a quadriplegic, don't have the strength for that. So it's like I will say if you have the luxury, or if you I recently got a new wheelchair. I kept my old power chair, and I'm using that as my travel chair just because of if something goes wrong, I'd rather it happen to my older chair than my new chair. So I don't know if that's obviously that's not always, I've not ever had that luxury until recently. So, but if that is something you've ever thought about, you might want to think about if you have another chair that you're comfortable being in for a week or two. That can always be an option too, just in case something happens. At least it's not your main chair when you get back home.
Good call on that one, by the way, on you traveling in the old chair. What I did just, when I got to Philly and I talked about being proactive and thinking ahead, I know my chair very well. I know how it gets fixed. It's looks more complicated than it is, but I immediately called the manufacturer. I asked them to FedEx me to my home back in Florida the part that I needed. So with the chair that I use, thank God I was able to kind of get around, but I did not have a front capsule the whole time. And it was there. I submitted everything to the airline, and I got a check about a month later. So it's not always easy. That's why I always say try to be prepared and, like I said, think of where you're going and uh, be resourceful because sometimes being stuck in a manual chair when used to a power chair is not the greatest thing, and it will take a little while to get it.
Yeah. And I really want to, we're doing a lot of times worst case scenario. I'd still encourage you, please travel, get out, do things because most of the time I've traveled, I have not had any issues. But we're also just preparing you of something that happens. We don't want you to ever think, oh, I can't travel because I'm in a chair. That's completely not true.
100% true.
This is Danica. I also want to jump in and agree with TJ. You should still travel and um, note that this was actually part of the wheelchair user rule that came out. They increased the type, they enhanced the type of loaner wheelchair they do need to give you specifically, and because this is very, very important, I do want to read the little terminology. They must meet the passenger's functional and safety related needs to the maximum extent possible. So if they are not giving you a loaner wheelchair that meets your functional and safety related needs, you actually have the right to go and choose your own loaner wheelchair and they have to reimburse you. So that gives the passenger even more rights for the loaner wheelchairs.
Yes, thank you, Danica. I
If you do run into a problem, the airlines don't love social media, just to let you know that. So if you have a problem and you want to say something, don't be shy because they will respond to you quicker, sometimes through social media if you're not hearing from them.
There are a couple questions about traveling with backup batteries. Can you guys talk about that a little bit?
I personally have never had to really worry about because the good thing is like I was saying with the chairs, a lot of most of the new chairs now, very few of them are wet cell where they're worried about them leaking or dry, so they don't disconnect them. So I've never had an issue, and I always have my I make sure I always have my charger with me. But from a battery standpoint, I've never really had to worry about backup batteries on there because usually I felt pretty good that they're going to be there because if something happened with the batteries that means something happened with the connections and stuff like that, where I'd be getting a loaner chair if that was the situation.
So I happened to be yesterday in a place where they were selling some of the travel wheelchairs, and there was a woman there asking the question. It's no problem them taking the on those new the power chairs that have extra batteries. As long as you identify what kind of battery it is, it should not be a problem. And another thing also that I do is every time I travel, I have an air tag attached to my chair, so I know where my chair is at all times.
Next, I'm going to read this question from Tessa. Um, she says, is there some kind of stipulation where the aircraft and workers are supposed to leave your wheelchair in the upright position instead of laying the chair on its side? My chair gets damaged almost every time I've flown and wondering what others may have experienced um, or if this doesn't happen.
I don't know if there's a provision. I know it's about how they can get it in, but like I was saying earlier, that's why if you have the capability, I make my. That's why I always take my headrest with me and anything else that, and I can lay my chair as flat as possible to keep it not as high so they don't turn it on its side. I tuck the footrest in as far as possible. I know Alan takes his off. Mine's not able to come off, but I flip up the footrest, make it shorter to make it as small as possible is always going to be the best benefit. Also, make sure it's still going to work for you. And I always stress to the people that are putting it on there, please do not turn it on its side. So I don't know if I don't think there's an actual provision on it, but I do my best to beg and plead and tell them not to, and also make it easier for them so they don't have to turn on its side.
Uh, Definitely try not to have them turn it on its side. Like I said, there are certain airlines when you put in your profile what your chair is, they will not let you book a flight if your chair will not fit in and they have to turn it on their sides. So some of the airlines are taking that into account when you book your ticket, and you have to be proactive. And that's where I said, talk to the gate agent, ask for the person that's underneath the plane, and tell them how your chair should be moved, and then talk to the pilot. So do as much as you can so your chair is treated with dignity.
And I also want to share, I do know that the airlines, some of the airlines are looking at this and working on this and researching and developing ways to transport, to make this a better, more efficient, safer way to transport your chairs. So they are working on that. There was also a question regarding being able to stay in your chair. There every year
Not,
there's one of our coalition partners, All Wheels Up, is really dedicated to the advocacy around this. I don't have any new developments to push on it, but people are working towards the end goal, being
And,
able to stay in your own chair on the airline.
I
So,
was at the Abilities Expo this past weekend. They had it in Dallas, and I spoke with Wheels Up, and they're definitely still working as diligently as possible. I mean, trust me, I would love it if it is. It's just not here yet, but the
the,
at least I've seen models of things that might be able to happen one of these days. So I'm feeling a little more optimistic about it than I did 5, 10 years ago. So
the
yeah.
problem that they're dealing with is where the actual seat sits. If you're putting a chair in, what the load, how much the chair weighs, and can the floor and the holding device, the docking mechanism actually hold the chair, God forbid something happens on a plane. So that's really the issue is the different weights of the chairs and things along those lines, and the floor.
Hey, thank you, everyone. My apologies that we weren't able to get to all of your questions, but I did my best to um, answer as much as we could. There is so much content here, and that's why we are going to continue this discussion. We are going to have a follow-up session on this early in 2026 so that we can work with you on putting together your stories and sharing more of your um, stories regarding accessible travel. We didn't even get to talk about ground transportation as well. There's a lot to talk about. So,
it,
and then Danica had mentioned that there's going to be a wheelchair user rule 2 that the administration is going to be putting out in the summer of 2026 is when it's expected. So we're going to train you. We want everyone to provide feedback and make those public comments when that rule is released. So we will have another session. And then we also just want to remind you to follow us on social media. We are going to be doing a video series on quick travel tips over a lot of the things that we talked about today.
and
TJ, did you
Angel,
want to say something?
yeah, I was just saying, if you really have questions, if you feel like you're having your upcoming travel and you're worried and you haven't traveled yet, you can reach out to christopherreeve.org. You can even ask for a mentor. I am the national mentor coordinator. I could provide you with a mentor that would be someone that has traveled that's near your level of movement and disability that you can talk to and have some guidance, not only about traveling, but whether that be anything in life. But we have information specialists as well that can send you information about specific things that you might be needing. So please don't hesitate to reach out on that way if you have something coming up and you have questions.
Thank you. And then next, Gerard, next slide, if you don't mind just sharing our contact information. I've included our Director of Public Policy here. And Gerard is our Grassroots Advocacy Manager, and myself. And if you'd like to reach out to TJ, Allen, or Danica from PBA, just let me know and I can connect you later. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.